Bookerville's Housekeeping features an app, which is really a mobile optimized web page, so no one has to install anything. So it's not really an app per se, but saying app is so much easier than saying mobile optimized web page, so that's what we call it. Anyway, how do you get to the housekeeping app in Bookerville? There's two ways. Either use the drop list in the upper right area of the header, or on your master calendar, there's a button for it in the lower left. In this session, I'm going to demonstrate and talk about the housekeeping app in its default mode, which we just call standard. We never really had a name for this because it was just always the way the housekeeping app worked for many years. We've recently added a new mode to run your housekeeping in, which involves scheduling housekeeping events for specific properties and for specific users. I plan to address that in a new video next month. But so because we now have that new mode, we kind of need a name for this original mode, and so we're just going with standard, okay? In the standard mode, the housekeeping app shows all the properties for which you've been granted clean or inspect permission. Later, I'll talk a little bit about how to set up specific users in your Bookerville account and grant them clean and or inspect permissions on a property by property basis. This list will always show all the properties that you have housekeeping permissions on. If you set up a user and assign them housekeeping permission on 5 properties, then they will only and always see those 5 properties. If you're signed in as the Bookerville account owner, then you'll of course see all the properties in your account. What will change over time is how these properties are sorted. Notice that there are 3 broad groups of properties: the reds, the oranges, and the greens. The reds are the ones that need to be cleaned or inspected and are also not occupied at the moment. Oranges are occupied, and greens don't need any attention at this time. The ones that need the most urgent attention are at the top, and they are sorted based on the urgency of their housekeeping needs. In fact, each color group is sorted based on urgency. In this case, La Jolla Joy is at the very top of the list because it needs to be cleaned today. The last departure was May 7th, the next arrival is today, and Bookerville could not find any reported cleans or inspects in between those dates. So no one has cleaned or inspected it since the last departure on May 7th, and someone new is arriving today, so this one's pretty urgent. Soledad Palace is next because its last departure was also May 7th, but the next arrival is tomorrow, May 13th. And also no clean or inspects have been reported in between those 2 dates, so it needs urgent attention, but it's not as urgent as La Jolla Joy, which has an arrival today. Okay? This next one illustrates how sometimes the dates in between bookings can be several months. The Sandcastle doesn't have an arrival until late November. And then, all the rest of these properties under it don't have any new bookings in the future at all. They're still marked with a red dot because they have not been reported as cleaned or inspected since the last departure. But they are sorted to the bottom of the group of reds because their priority's not as high as those at the top with arrivals pending. Okay? The oranges are occupied. We give these a different color because even though some of them might be pretty close to being urgent, there might even be a new arrival tomorrow. But since they're occupied at the moment, you probably don't want anyone barging in to clean or inspect just yet. And of course, greens don't need anything at all because Bookerville found to clean and inspect after the last departure, but before any future arrivals. In this case, Pet Palace is the only one that even has a future arrival. But since it's been cleaned and inspected after the previous departure, it's still considered green because you don't need to clean or inspect it again. This is one of those things that's difficult and cumbersome to explain, with words what it's doing. But in practice, it's really pretty common sense and straightforward to actually use it. So let's take a look at what the cleaners and inspectors will do with this list. They can tap on any of these property names and it takes them here where they can check the boxes that they have cleaned the property, inspected the property, and 3 other helpful options for if they see damage, theft, or if maintenance is needed. Real quick before we get further into this, the roles of cleaning and inspecting are 2 separate things in Bookerville because some groups have different people doing those 2 different things. You can control this in your dashboard account settings tab in the members with permissions section, and we'll get to that later. But for now, I just want to point out that if the person using this only has clean permission, they won't see that inspected box, and same thing for someone with only inspect permission, they won't see the cleaned box at all, okay? Because there's, if you set it up that way, presumably you've got two different users doing those two different things, so they're handled separately. There's a box to put in comments, and this is optional unless they check the boxes for any of damage, theft, or maintenance. Once they click save here, they are shown a camera icon that they can tap to take up to 3 photos, which will get uploaded and saved in your Bookerville dashboard so you can see them. This is optional, meaning they're not required to take any photos. So if you want them to do that, you just need to train them and tell them that's what you expect them to do. And here is also where I need to point out that if they check the box for maintenance required, Bookerville automatically creates a new work order for it, and their comments are used as the description of the work order. Okay, so they will also be given the chance to take up to 3 additional photos that will be attached to that new work order. This is one of the reasons these videos tend to run longer than any of us wants them to. Bookerville is very integrated with all of its various features. Each one can feed into multiple other sections. So, we very often need to at least touch on them when explaining how some of these things work. There's going to be another video on maintenance in the very near future, so if you subscribe to our channel, you'll get notified of it, and, well, whenever we publish new ones. It's a great way to stay current with what Bookerville is doing. I'm running this on my laptop, so this page looks large, and when I click on the camera icon, it brings up this pop-up window for me to choose a photo to upload from my laptop's file system. But when they're using this on a phone, that will instead bring up their phone's camera app, and each time they take a picture, it just automatically uploads it. So it's a much smoother process and simpler thing when they're doing it on their phone. And so that's about it for reporting what they've done at the property. Once they tap the Done button, they are directed back to the housekeeping list of properties. And sure enough, the property they just reported as cleaned, inspected, or whatever is now at the bottom, with the rest of the greens, as you would expect, because it's now ready for the next arrival. So in terms of using the housekeeping app, that's it. We'll publish another video, hopefully next month, on the new mode of housekeeping operation where you can schedule cleanings and inspections for certain properties, certain dates, and assign them to certain users. And this does change how the app displays the list of properties, but it doesn't change how the housekeepers use it to report on things when they're in the field. Real quickly here, since I promised I would in that first section, I want to show you how to set up sub-users in Bookerville that have clean or inspect permission for properties in your account. Go to your Dashboard Account Settings tab and scroll down to the Members with Permissions box. If you're like me here and you've never done this yet, then you don't have any. Just click the Add New Member button. It brings up this. There's a whole separate video on sub-users in Bookerville, so you may want to go watch that because it goes into much more detail than what I'm going to show here. But to just get a cleaner or inspector set up, you'll need to come up with a member name for them and put in their valid email address. Those are the only 2 required fields here, and so especially for the email address, make sure you get that correct because Bookerville uses that to send them an email with their password in it so that they can sign in. Member name does not have to be their actual name. It can be anything, really, as long as it doesn't already exist in the system, which it'll tell you about if that happens. You can fill in these other fields if you want. You're basically just doing them a favor so that they don't have to, but it's optional. And whether you do it or not, they'll be able to add or edit these values just like you can at the top of their own Account Settings tab. Hit the Create New Member button at the bottom, and that causes it to create that user and also send them the same welcome email Bookerville sent you when you signed up. It just has their member name and system-generated random password in it so that they can sign in. And here it presents the permissions grid for this member. As I said, there's a lot to this feature in Bookerville, and you'll probably want to explore this for many other purposes, but that's beyond the scope of what we're showing here. For this purpose, it's these 2 columns of checkboxes you want to focus on: clean and inspect. You can check these, 1 or both or none, for all the properties in your account. You can use these to select and clear whole columns at a time, whatever you want to do. When you're done, be sure to hit the Save Permissions button. Once that's done, they now have the permission needed for those properties to appear in their housekeeping app. When adding, removing permissions for existing users, they may have to sign out and sign back in to see the effects, or just wait about 2 hours. Okay? That's it. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out the rest of the videos in this series on housekeeping, because those will cover how you see and manage the housekeeping activity in your dashboard, including reports, your at-a-glance tab, and even housekeeping checklists and special notes for individual bookings. Bookerville can do a lot for you, so let's get you set up for success.